Do you think Paula Vennells should be stripped of her CBE?
Absolutely. She was taking hundreds of thousands of pounds when people were being accused falsely, put in prison, and sadly dying. I too have had a constituent who has walked through this crisis, and the pain and suffering that that constituent's had, alongside the other hundreds of people. Honestly, it's awful. And as a MP, I've stood up in Parliament on numerous occasions, highlighting and pleading with government to use its golden share in order to change the outcome for these individuals. And government just sat on its hands, and it's been so frustrating.
Rachel McLean, I'll come to you first. What's your kind of take on this story?
It is a really shocking story, and the individual impact on people is incomprehensible. And I've got a constituent that's been affected, someone who's actually died before their case was settled. He's left his wife behind, and it is appalling. I mean, I very much welcome what's now being said by the Prime Minister and the Justice Secretary. We need to strain every sinew to make sure that these people who have done nothing wrong, they were operating a vital business that's at the heart of the community, often working very long hours, a first point of contact for local neighbourhoods. And, you know, we've all had that interaction with post offices, and we know what they do. And so it's heartbreaking, really, to see the human tragedy that's being played out.
And just would love a straight answer on this. Should Paula Vennells, the chief executive, give back her CBE? She should be stripped of her CBE.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Rachel Maskell, do you think Paula Vennells should be stripped of her CBE?
Absolutely. She was taking hundreds of thousands of pounds when people were being accused falsely, put in prison, and sadly dying. I too have had a constituent who has walked through this crisis, and the pain and suffering that that constituent's had, alongside the other hundreds of people. Honestly, it's awful. And as a MP, I've stood up in Parliament on numerous occasions, highlighting and pleading with government to use its golden share in order to change the outcome for these individuals. And government just sat on its hands, and it's been so frustrating. Latterly, it has moved to an inquiry, and of course, we're at the stage now where the arts have really put this centre stage. But that compensation must be paid, and paid expediently. But I also think we need to look at the governance of the Post Office, as with Royal Mail, whose finances are in real grave difficulty. And I think what we need to do is to bring that service back into public ownership, where there is real accountability, and we can then look at rebuilding the service and public confidence behind it.
Alison Thewliss, that question to you about stripping Paula Vennells of her CBE. Rachel McLean, Rachel Maskell agrees with that. What do you think?
Yes, I would absolutely agree. And she only got the CBE, I understand, in 2019, when all of this was widely known, and campaigns have been run on this, and postmasters have been raising their concerns for some time. It's astonishing she was awarded it in the first place, and there's some questions to be asked about the decision making around that in the first place. So I'm deeply concerned by this, and have been following the work of Private Eye and others who've done a lot of work over the years to expose this scandal. It shouldn't have taken a TV series to get people's attention, to get the government's attention on this issue, because it's deeply unfair, and people have lost their lives, people have suffered because of this injustice for many, many years. And the government needs to move swiftly to ensure that everybody gets the compensation that they are due, that convictions are quashed, and that people see justice, because they've already waited too long for that.
Absolutely. Someone's message and John's message and saying, please don't only concentrate on Paula Vennells. This was a cadre of senior managers who were complicit in this and should be brought to book. John, we did an interview actually yesterday with James Hartley, who's defending the victims, and he went through a list of people that definitely need to face justice, and that's what this public inquiry is going to do. But of course, Paula Vennells is a very important figure in in this. James Healy, another story which has come to light, and actually somebody has just messaged in about this, asking about Fujitsu as well and all their IT and software. The Sunday Times today has done a bit of digging around and looked into the fact that Fujitsu has won £8 billion worth of government contracts since the scandal. We spoke with Jim Armitage, our business editor, yesterday, and he made the point that getting this Horizon project off the ground was like a gateway into just hoovering up so many other big government contracts. Do you think these Fujitsu contracts need to be re-examined in light of what's happened?
Well, that's certainly the case being made by David Davis today in the Sunday Times, and I suspect we're going to see other MPs taking up that cause and championing it in the weeks ahead. You're right. I mean, how many times have we seen these big companies get these contracts and then behave appallingly and yet walk away and get other deals further down the line? So I think really the story is now, where does it go next? And I think there'll be calls to reform the post office in terms of taking away their right to have private prosecutions. They seem to abuse that kind of historic hangover from the 17th century when the post office played a very different role in public life. And also looking at Fujitsu as well, and also making sure that we can get the compensation, because I think only less than 100 convictions have been quashed thus far. There's about 700 or more postmasters who were convicted, and I think the deadline for compensation, I believe, is August. And from the ITV drama alone, we've already seen 50 new cases come forward. Yeah. There might be people out there who are owed money. And I would hope that the government will put themselves full shoulder to the wheel on this and really champion the issue. I've heard Bob Neal, the chairman of the Justice Select Committee, say that it's a matter of resources in terms of taking away the right of prosecutions from and reviewing all this from the post office and giving it to, say, the CPS. Well, if that's the case, why not use some of that money that's being now channeled into things like tax cuts, etc., and put a bit of that aside and to try and address this scandal?
And just briefly, James, Ed Davies coming under quite an amount of pressure. The Sunday Times has got some correspondence between him and Alan Bates. How much pressure do you think he's under?
So I think he is under pressure, but I would say that sort of what saves Ed Davey is the fact that this was a scandal that went on for the best part of 20 years. And I think that often it's a classic case of the ministers sticking by Whitehall advice and saying nothing to do with me, Gov. So I think that sadly, as we've seen too many different scandals over the past 50 years, I reckon that it could be a case where actually there's enough blame to go around for too many people. And so he'll probably be able to ride this out.
And just to the politicians, I just want to come back to you very briefly on this question of a couple of people messaging in about Fujitsu and these big government contracts. They've got £8 billion worth of contracts. And as Jim Armitage, our business editor, told us yesterday, getting that Horizon gig was the thing that, then made them very, very, it brought so much more money and business their way. Do you think the government should look again at whether they should be doing business with Fujitsu, Rachel McLean?
Yeah, I'm sure questions will be being asked on this, and rightly so, because let's not forget these contracts are worth a significant amount of public money. And I've been a minister myself, and I've been involved in awarding contracts, and I know that there's a considerable amount of detail and scrutiny that goes into it. But at the same time, if you find these egregious breaches of business care and taking care of how you conduct your business, it's only right that we look at where future business is awarded.
Definitely. Rachel Maskell, your view on this?
Absolutely, but we need to look at the procurement process again and those interests which sit within it. I mean, we think about the federated data platform in the NHS with Palantir and an enormous contract, and that going to one company. I think we really need to look at what needs to be outsourced, what needs to be brought back in house as well, those opportunities to see good governance being put into organisations. Of course, with issues like IT, there's very few big national IT projects which have gone well for governments, and I think we really do need to scrutinise how we move forward in the future.
Pam's just messaging saying, Aisha, I can't believe that Fujitsu and Horizon are still at the post office. Incredible. Alison Thewliss, your views on Fujitsu and hoovering up all these big contracts?
Yes, I would agree with that as well. They have clearly mismanaged this and misled ministers and civil servants about the systems that they've created. And some of the stories where people were on training flagging that there was an issue with the system and said, oh yeah, it just does that, don't worry about it. I mean, this is just a real scandal that they are still involved at all, that they're still getting government contracts, that those responsible for having done this have not been properly and fully held to account.